Hey everyone, welcome back. Technical difficulties. We are ready to go now, and I'll just do the intro again. Welcome to my colleague Patrick Clarke from Voltron Data. We are here for another session of Philip in the Cloud, and we are going to be talking about Ibis sessionization, which is an interesting use case that is commonly done in analytics. Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, so yeah, I guess let's just get started. So basically, I wrote this how-to guide for the Ibis docs to help people create sessions, supposing to have like a log of events for. Um, you could do timestamps. You could probably do other like units, but let's just focus on timestamps for now. So a session being, suppose you are like polling an object, like its state. And you want to make sure that you're measuring like how long an object is in that state. For video games, that might be how long a character is in the world. For a user app, it could be how long a user is doing a certain action. And like Philip said, this could be used in many analytics cases. So you might want to optimize, user flow through a portal or something, um, that kind of thing. So what we're
Nice.
going to do is we're just going to follow along the code block. Philip's going to type in the code or, copy and paste, and I'll just talk a little bit about what I found interesting about it or just explain what's going on.
Great, thanks, Patrick. I put a
Yep.
link in the chat, just so people can follow along if they want to. So I'm going to paste in some imports here.
Yep. So that underscore API actually is pretty awesome. Helps you chain expressions really well. You see I'm aliasing it. There's like a GitHub discussion about it. I think, Philip, you're involved in that, right? Um, but yeah, if you don't know what it is, check it out. I'm going to write a how-to guide about it next. So keep
Sweet,
on the
that'll be
lookout.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to paste in just the data source here, and I guess I'll just talk a little bit about this real quick. This is a World of Warcraft gaming data set, and I'll let Patrick kind of go into more detail there. But basically, what the code is doing here is actually just reading a parquet like straight off of a URL in the Ibis tutorial data set bucket.
Yeah, it's super cool. Like anyone can access this. And using the .read method, you can read from HTTP, which is really, really awesome. But this data set is, so in 2008, I think someone, I don't know what organization was doing this, it's probably Blizzard, but they were polling characters inside of their servers. So this is actually following a tutorial on the Pollers API about how to sessionize a log of events. So I'm just basically going through this. Um, and what this does is it lists the character and then the timestamp. So the timestamp is the time that they were polled. Polls happen on a cadence of about 10 minutes. I found that they're not actually 10 minutes. It's like a range of 9 minutes to 15 minutes. So
Interesting.
one issue I had with the pollers sessionization thing was they used like number of times polled to get the length of a session, which, if you average that, it's about 10 minutes.
Okay.
But if you want to do like more accurate time interval stuff, then you should probably just use the timestamps and then use the time intervals once you convert pandas.
Nice. Okay. So I'm
Yep.
gonna run the next line.
Here we're just setting like the definition of what a session is. So this is time in seconds. So we're looking at 30 minutes, 60 seconds. Um, so between polling, we want to make sure that users are actually taking a break. So the goal of this is to find out who a bot is. So if a session length is too long, then that session is suspect. It could be a person that set up a script that is basically just like trying to cheat.
Yep.
Um, and we want to make sure that people are taking breaks. So this also helps with determining like average session times. So analytics, again, it's very useful information to get.
Nice. Cool.
This is where Ibis starts to really shine. So you can define your windows up front, and then you can just keep reusing them. I think I used this one like once or twice, and then the next window that we make, which is a session window, like we use that 3 or 4 times. So rather than in SQL, you're like typing out this some column over partition by order by following, etc. You just type this once, save it to a variable, and then reuse it whenever you want.
Yeah, and so in a lot of SQL databases, you can define windows sort of at the end of like a select statement, and you could say I forget exactly what the syntax is, but it's like, window as X, and like then you can use X wherever you would use a window, so you can say over X. And what's nice about doing this like in a programming language instead of SQL is that if your backend doesn't support that syntax, you don't have to think about it, right? Like you can just use the variable of the programming language, and yes, the SQL generated will have a repeated window everywhere, but you as the author of the analytics code like didn't actually have to think about that.
Right. Really cool.
Okay.
And here we're just defining what the lag is. So this is basically adding or creating a column expression uh, where you're basically finding the lag of a timestamp. So you order by your entity window, which is defined above, group by the entities, and then find the previous timestamp in the group. So the first one in that window is going to be null, which it should be the first timestamp of a given entity or character, and that should be a new session. So we're trying to find the session by character, and that's what this is starting to get us.
Right. And so the way that I tend to think about some of these window operations is roughly analogous to how you might think about a group by, where you're taking a chunk of all the, a single, like all the rows where, char is equal to 59425, and then you're sorting those rows by timestamp, and then you're shifting them down, forward one. And you're kind of doing that for each, unique set of char, basically.
Right. Well, like I imagine like the connect four tiles,
Yeah.
or like little pucks, just like shifting down.
Yep.
Um,
Totally.
yep.
Okay.
Oops.
Oh, I forgot. I jumped ahead. Sorry.
Oops. And this is basically just taking that column, that TS lag column that we created just now, and then subtracting that from the actual timestamp. So if you imagine like a pandas data frame where like the index corresponds to a timestamp for a certain row, the TS lag should be the next timestamp in that window. Phil, you could probably explain that a little better, but this is just subtracting those two values.
Yeah, so after we've sort of grouped and shifted everything, we're taking whatever the timestamp is, and subtracting basically the previous grouped and ordered timestamp,
And
to create this column.
this column expression could be useful. In the final result, we don't keep it, mostly because it's Y and G and I. But when Ibis supports time intervals a little bit better, we could probably just use this to like plot out the length of sessions directly using Ibis.
Yeah, this actually, I was talking to another colleague earlier about this, and we do have an operation for this, but no backend implements it, so it's kind of just collecting dust, so to speak. And we're thinking about maybe having like a delta API where you give it 2 timestamps and you specify the unit, and you get back an integer in those units, because this is sort of the problem of like interval arithmetic, and it's like, how do I cast an arbitrary interval to like some number of seconds when there's daylight savings and other things, and so it becomes
Right.
kind of a mess. Okay, so I'm going to repaste is new session so we can keep the continuity.
Cool.
Okay.
This is basically just a Boolean, true, false, if it's a new session. So if it's null, then that's a new session, because that's, it's a new character. It's the first timestamp for that character. It's new session. If it's a character with I completely forgot what I was going with that. So
This is like it's like if the difference between the timestamp of the session and the lagged timestamp is greater than the session boundary duration, which was what 30 minutes, then
yeah,
we set it to 1,
right.
right?
Yeah, if it's yeah, exactly.
And so what you'll end up with, like sort of temporarily, and like I guess we can show this as like intermediate steps to create the final result, is you'll end up with a bunch of zeros and then a bunch of ones. Sorry, you'll end up with I think a bunch of zeros and then a bunch of nulls. So it's like a bunch of zeros, sorry, a bunch of falses, a single null, falses, null, etc.
Right. Um, yeah, this is so we take this boolean and then we cast it to int so that we get a bunch of like ones and zeros and then we add them over a window later.
I actually
But
removed the casting from the docs because it turns out it wasn't necessary. But
oh, okay.
um,
Okay.
okay, so let's do one more line before we get to the big boy.
Yep. Here's that session window. So you're grouping by a character and a session ID. And the session ID doesn't even exist yet. So like we're creating this in a mutate later. But here we could bring it up front now, and then define this window and then use it again and again. So I think we use it 3 times. Is that right?
Let's see, session window,
Twice, I
something
think.
like that, twice, I think.
Yeah. But in any case, like just like you talked about earlier, you could define these in some backends upfront using SQL, but that's not super reliable, and the syntax might not be the same. So it's pretty awesome to do this in Python, just like define it up front and then use it again and again and again.
Okay, instead of pasting the last example, let's just like build it up from scratch. So
Sure. Yeah.
data's still the same, um,
Yeah.
but let's just kind of build. Let's just make a variable called d, and we'll keep kind of overriding that with new steps. So the thing we have is new session.
Yep. So we're taking that boolean from earlier. We're filling NA with true so that we can say, okay, if it's a new character, a new timestamp, it's definitely a new session. Um,
And I'm not sure if the new session. Let's just see what this looks like. Because the screen is too big enough to where I think the new session column will probably get clipped if we. Oh right, sorry. Okay, yeah. So it's right null and then a bunch of falses and then null, which we then filled with true.
right.
Yep. And then the next thing we want to do is take the table with new session, and we're going to add another column, session ID, which is c.newSession.sum over entity window.
Right. And here we're basically just assigning session IDs using a rolling window. So the first session will be 1. The next session will be 1 plus 1, 2, and then keep going. So you're just rolling your sum down over that entity window.
Yeah, so this is like pretty neat, right? You're kind of taking a cumulative sum over a window, which allows you to kind of repeat the value because it's basically 1, a bunch of zeros, and then 1, a bunch of zeros. But because you've ordered, you keep track of the value across windows, which is kind of nice.
Right.
Um, and then new session is kind of it's kind of a temporary column, so we're gonna drop that because we don't need it from the output. And then the next thing I'll type, and then let's see if I can just paste this guy in here. Actually, let me just do it bit by bit. Hopefully I don't mistype anything.
There's that session window.
Yep. Oh, you were right. I didn't. We are using it another time here.
So we take for each window, each characters or entities session. So character one, their first session, we take the max of that session, which is basically the timestamp, the last timestamp that we see them in that session, and then the first timestamp that we see them in that session, the min, and then we subtract those. And then we get the duration of that session.
Nice.
That does give us the duration in each row, which is a little annoying because I really wanted to do like a rolling sum over that TS delta. I think that would be a lot more interesting to see. That way you can see like the length of the session over time. But we'll just do that another day.
Once we have the functionality implemented.
Yeah.
Cool.
But in this case, like we get what we want. We get the session duration. We can filter this to find all the rows where that belong to a session that exceed a certain value or don't exceed a certain value.
Yeah, it's getting clipped, so let's just show the subset of that column. Right.
So there you go.
And then the final bit is kind of I think a formality here, ordered by char c dot timestamp. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit to see if we can get all those columns on the screen here. Okay, sweet.
Cool. There it is.
All right, and that is how you do sessionization with Ibis. Thanks,
Yep.
Patrick. This has
Yeah, no
been
problem.
awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Philip.
All right, see everyone later. Thanks for tuning in.